I'm Ed Pavlich. I'm the director of the Creative Writing Program, UGA. Wonderful to see you all here tonight. Wonderful to see Kiese Laymon here tonight. It's been a month unlike I can describe, actually. It's been a crazy month, but all the way through it was sitting there on the calendar, February 28th. And I had this kind of up in the sky, so I figured I would make it just at least until this is over, and then we'll see what happens. So we had a really wonderful visitor here for the last 2 days named Aruni Kashyap, who is, I think, right about now, taking off on his way back to Northeast India. It's a long trip. I've made it. And he did it there and back in about 72 hours or something. So I just want, if you all would, in your own minds for a moment, wish him well in his travels. And coming from where he came from to the United States to arrive basically within, 36 hours of some crazy MF shooting some people up, look just like him in Kansas. For reasons we all know the kind of rhetorical genealogy of by now, at least in the present moment. So I want to wish our brother Aruni safe travels back, and I hope you all join me in wishing him safe travels back. Thanks to Kiese Laymon for folding hip-hop and popular culture and family into the literary forms, essay, and novel. Thanks for making family feel like hip-hop and making hip-hop feel like family until uncles and former selves and lost loves and maybe future lovers spill from the pages of novels that used to be wrapped up too tight to enter. For proof that if you search for the heart of Chicago hard enough, you end up lost in Mississippi. For knowing that Chicago spells Kanye, but also spells Bernie Mac, as in, pardon my quotation, the blackest, baddest, most loving genius uncle son bitch to walk across this country stage. And no matter how big he got, he always looked happy to be here with us. We loved you, Bernie Mac, for all of this and a whole lot more. You reminded us we were never alone, that we owed each other honest, joyful explorations of our past and present pain. Bernie Mac once said, a lot of my material comes from my pain. The loss of my parents, my family. I try to find humor in the most inopportune times. That's what keeps us alive, keeps us decent people, keeps us connected no matter what. That's comedy, man, that's comedy. Thank you, writes Kiese Laymon, for your character, Bernard McCullough. Thank you for your pain. And thank you for Stank, for Cold Drank, for being the dopest and most willing to be open and in-process black writer in the nation. Thanks for the love. Love him back. Here's your chance. Kiese Laymon.
Start by thanking Christine for taking care of all the logistics. I'm an okay writer, but I'm terrible at responding to emails, and you kind of stayed on that, so thank you so much for being wonderful at that. And also, I just want to say, I was lucky enough to talk to Ed's class today, and when you came around that corner, I was shook, because I was like, oh shit, that's Ed Pavlich, oh my God. And I just want to thank you for your art and your work, but also being a genius who is approachable. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times you talk to these people who write these incredible books, incredible passages, incredible sentences, and they carry themselves around Earth as if they write incredible sentences, incredible passages, incredible books. So I just want to thank you, man, for like changing my artistic life, but also for being welcoming to somebody you don't really know. And for nurturing that class that I was in today. Your students made me feel happy and home in a way that I did not expect. All right, Huh? Oh. See? All right, so y'all, I came up here with a big ass pack of papers. I'm not gonna read all of this stuff. But what I am gonna do is read a chapter from this new book I have coming out called Heavy. The book is about my family's relationship to sexual violence, food, and really words. And ultimately, it became a book about my relationship with my mother, part of my relationship with my grandma. And so I'm gonna read I think I'm gonna read the third chapter. I like y'all. I might read something else. Let me see. I'm gonna read something else. I'm gonna read the fourth chapter. No, I need to have courage up in this book. I never read the third chapter before. I'm gonna read the third chapter. Yeah. All right. So, and then we'll talk, and then we can go home. Thank y'all so much for having me. All right. This is from the memoir called Heavy. A few weeks into the summer, when counting to 10 and limiting my carbs didn't work for either of us, you put me on a bus and told me that I had to stay with Grandmama in Forest, Mississippi. I love Grandmama, but I didn't really love going to her house any day other than Friday. Every Friday, Grandmama let me watch Dukes of Hazzard, a show you said, quote, operates in a world even more racist than the one we live in, where two white convicted drug dealers who keep violating probation and making fools of the police in a red Dodge Charger with the Confederate flag on top called General Lee never, ever go to prison. The Friday night I was sent to stay with Grandma, I asked her if black folk like us could ever get away from the police like Bo and Luke do. Hell no, Grandma said, before I could get the whole question out. Nope, not at all, never, nope. You better never try it either, Key. The one or two times there were black characters on the show, I remember Grandmama and Ofadi getting closer to the screen and cheering for them the same way they cheered if all the black team of the Georgetown Hoyas were playing, or if a black contestant on Wheel of Fortune, $25,000 Pyramid, or The Price is Right won. Like most black women in Forest, my grandmama had a number of side hustles other than her job working the line at the chicken plant. One of her side hustles was selling vegetables from her garden. Another side hustle was selling fried fish, pound cakes, and sweet potato pies every Saturday evening to anyone who would buy them. The most important of her side hustles was washing clothes, ironing, cooking, washing dishes for this white family called the Mumfords. After church on the way to the Mumfords, I complained to Grandmama that my slacks were too tight, so I had to unzip them if I wanted to breathe. Grandmama laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed until she didn't. She said that she wouldn't be at the Mumfords for too long. I always saw the Mumfords' dirty clothes next to Grandmama's washer and their clean clothes out on the clothesline behind her house. The Mumfords lived right behind us on Highway 35. I was amazed at how the houses off of Highway 35 were the only houses in Forest that looked like the houses on Leave It to Beaver. When I imagined the inside of rich white folks' houses, I imagined gobbling up hands full of Crunch and Munch and filling up my cup with name brand ginger ale with the crushed ice that came from their silver refrigerators. Grandmama left the key in the ignition and told me she'd be back in about 20 minutes. Don't say none to that badass Mumford boy if he come out here, Key, she said. You know he ain't got a liquor home training. You hear me? And don't get out this car unless it's an emergency. I nodded yes and sprawled out across the front seat of the Impala. Damn near as soon as she went in the house, out came this boy who looked like a 9-year-old Mike D from the Beastie Boys. The Mumford boy was bone white and skinny in a way my grandmama called Po. Grandma didn't have much money and her shotgun house was as clean as could be inside, but raggedy as a roach on the outside. I always wondered why Grandmama never called us, or people with less stuff than her, Po. She called them folk who ain't got a pot to piss in, or folk whose money ain't all the way right, or folk with nan dime to their name. but she never used poor or po to talk about anything other than skinny people's bodies. Without knocking, the white boy opened the door to the driver's side of Grandmama's car. "You Reno grandson?" he asked me. "Who is Reno?" "Reno," he said, "the black lady who cleaned my house." I'd never seen this white Mumford boy before, but I'd seen the shiny gray swim jam trunks, the long striped socks, and the gray Luke Skywalker shirt he had on in our dirty clothes basket. I didn't like how knowing a white boy's clothes before I knew a white boy made me feel. I didn't like that this poor white boy who called my grandmama Reno and this black lady already had control over me. I thought about all our hours spent in Concord Missionary Baptist Church in Forest, Mississippi. According to Reverend Weathersby's stale preaching, part of our mission was to love white folk because they knew not what they did. We were supposed to heal white folk because they knew not who they were. We were supposed to forgive white folk because salvation awaited he or she or them or they who could withstand the wrath of the worst of white folk. My problem was that I didn't know any white folk other than my teachers, Miss Stockard and Miss Raphael, and the only white girl at my school, Lori Bakutis. And even though they were the three of the nicest people in my world, I'd read enough, listened enough, watched enough to know that they would and could cause a lot of destruction, a lot of suffering, and a lot of sadness, and then think nothing of it if you let them. I got out of the Impala and kept my hands in my pockets. "So you Reno's grandson?" the boy asked again. "You from Jackson, right?" Before I could say yes, the Mumford boy told me we couldn't come in his house, but we could play in the backyard. The phrase, "I'm good," was something you and I always said in Jackson, but I didn't know that I had ever meant it as much as I meant it that day. "I'm good," I told him. That's what I felt before I looked at the size of the Mumford's garage and saw a closet door open in the left corner. I walked toward the room and saw a washer, a dryer, and a scale on the ground. "What y'all call this room?" I asked him. "That's our washroom," he said. "Y'all still shoot folks in Jackson?" "A washroom?" I asked and ignored his question. I'd never seen a house in Jackson with an actual separate room for washing and drying clothes. At Grandmama's house, our washer was in the dining room and we didn't have a dryer, so we hung everything we could up on the clothesline. "Wait," I asked, "what's this scale doing up in here?" "My papa, he liked to weigh himself." "That washer," I said, "do it work?" "It worked fine," the Mumford boy said. "Good as new." "And the dryer too?" I looked at the two irons on the shelf hanging from an ironing board. I didn't know how to say what I wanted to say, so I angled myself away from him and stepped on the scale. "This scale is right?" "I don't know," he said. "I never used it. I told you it's my pawpaw scale." I walked back to Grandmama's Impala, got in the driver's seat and locked the doors. I remember gripping the steering wheel and wondering just how fat 218 pounds was for 11 years old. Less than a minute after I was in the car, the Mumford boy came back out. Without knocking, he tried to open the Impala's driver's side door again. "Come on and play, Jackson," he said from the outside of the Impala. "You just gotta take your shoes off and come in through the back." "No, I'm good," I rolled the window down and told him. "You won't shoot my BB gun in the backyard?" he asked me. "No," I told him, "I'm good. My mama don't let me shoot guns with people I don't know." "Fat ass nigger," the white boy said. "All y'all do is shoot guns in Jackson." And he hurried toward his house. I sat in Grandmama's Impala with a rot in my chest for a few seconds before sprinting out of the car after the Mumford boy. Grandmama walked out of the house with a clothes basket of clothes in one hand and an envelope in the other. When I told her what the Mumford boy said to me, Grandmama dropped the basket, grabbed me by my arm, and told me to get my black ass in the car and leave these folks alone. "You know who you messing with?" she asked me. "These folk liable to have us locked up under the jail key. Come on." From the doorway of his house, the Mumford boy looked back at me. "Yeah, I said it," he said, this time in front of my grandma. "Go back to Jackson and shoot guns, fat ass nigga." Being called a fat ass nigga by a white boy whose dirty clothes my grandmama had to wash for money made me feel like a fat ass nigga whose grandmama had to wash dirty clothes for money. Being called a fat ass nigga by a white boy whose dirty clothes my grandmama had to wash for money made me feel like a fat ass nigga. Being called a fat ass nigga by a white boy whose dirty clothes my grandmama had to wash for money made me feel fat. I kept looking at grandmama as we drove home. I was trying to decide if I should ask her why she had to wash, dry, iron, and fold a Mumford's dirty clothes if the Mumfords had a better washer than ours, a working dryer, a newer iron, and an ironing board. I wanted to ask her if there were better side hustles than washing nasty white folk clothes on the weekend, but I didn't say anything on the way home. I just looked at her face and saw deeper frown lines than I'd never seen before. I understood that day why older Southern black folk were so hungry for black wins against white folk, regardless of how tiny those wins were. For grandmama, the wins were always personal. For you, those wins were always political. For both of y'all, even though the wins seldom came, they always came with the anxiety of the consequence. I kept wishing I would have gone into Mumford's house and stole something. Stealing something that white folk valued felt like the only way to make this rot in my belly go away. Before going home, grandmama took the money she'd gotten from the Mumfords out of her bosom and she placed it in an envelope. She wrote your name and address on it and she put it in the mailbox downtown. Grandmama, I said as we turned down Old Morton Road, do those white folk know your name is Catherine or do they think your name is Reno? I don't know if they know my name or not, grandmama said. I know my name. I know how much they pay me to work every week too. Well, do you tell the Mumfords the truth when you in their house? No, she said, I sure don't. Then what do you tell them? I tell them whatever it takes to keep my job, she said. Whatever it takes to get their money. Oh, well, do you ever steal anything? Nah, Kiese, she said. They test me like that all the time. I love you and me too much to take anything that ain't mine. And if I ever stole from them folk, we wouldn't have nothing. Nothing. No house, nothing. When we pulled into our yard, grandmama told me to grab the basket of dirty clothes and put it next to the washer. I picked the clothes up and instead of stopping at the washer, I walked into the kitchen, placed the dirty clothes on the floor between the fridge and the oven. I looked around to see if grandmama was coming before stepping both of my penny loafers deep into the Mumford's clothes basket and doing quick feet like we had to do at basketball practice. I got your nigga right here, nigga, I said, stomping my feet all up in their dirty clothes as fast and hard and fast as I could. Y'all don't even know. Shit, I got your nigga right here, nigga. I was doing quick feet in the Mumford's clothes for a good 30 seconds when grandmama came out of nowhere, tearing me up. Get your tail out them white folk clothes, grandma said, whipping the shit out of my legs with this leather blue belt. But the licks didn't stop. I was still doing quick feet like it was going out of style. And get out my kitchen acting like a star-nated fool, she said. After the whooping, I asked grandmama whether she meant star-nated or stark naked. I told her I'd rather be a star-nated fool because I love stars, even though I didn't think star-nated was a word. Grandmama and I loved talking about words. She was better than anyone I knew at bending and breaking and coming up with words that weren't in the dictionary. I asked her what word I could use to make the Mumford boy felt what I felt. White, she said. That ain't nothing but white you saw in that child today. And I don't know if you want to make that child feel that. I looked at her and I told her that I felt like a nigga, and feeling like a nigga made me feel like my heart and my lungs and my brain were melting and starting to drip out of the ends of my toenails. It ain't about making white folk feel what you feel, she said. It's about not feeling what they want you to feel. You hear me? Grandmama started laughing. Baby, what you call yourself doing in them folks' clothes? Oh, I said and started doing it again real fast. At practice, we be calling this right here the quick feet drill. You gave them white folks' clothes them quick feets? Not feets, I said, grandmama, quick feet. Quick feets, she said again, laughing until she almost fell out of the chair. Quick foots. Grandmama, you so crazy. Sometime I told her and sat down between her legs. Grandmama, I hate white folks' clothes. I know you do, she said and stopped laughing. I don't much appreciate them or their clothes either, but Them dirty clothes is how we eat. It's how your mama and them ate too. Quick feets, she said again. I didn't laugh this time. I want you to know that I whipped you for acting up in my kitchen, not for messing up them folks' clothes. I spent so many hours in them white folks' kitchens, and I just want my children to respect my kitchen when I get home. Grandmama stood up and told me to follow her out to her garden. We picked butter beans and black-eyed peas and collard greens, green tomatoes. We hold peas and talked more about quick feet while the train behind the house roared with its whistle. My bucket of peas was between my legs. Grandmama stood up and she straddled my tub. I looked up at her hands and how they handled the whole peas. Key, try it like this, Grandmama said. When she reached for my face, I jumped back. Baby, what you jumping for, she asked me. I ain't trying to hit you. I didn't know how to answer her. I wanted to tell her, but I didn't know whether to start with the words I, or she, or he, or we, or one time, or don't tell nobody, or this might sound nasty, but all of that made me feel more afraid. Look at my hands, she said. You don't have to flinch. Look at my hands. I'm not trying to hurt you, baby. Grandmama took the bucket from between her legs and she went into the kitchen. I sat there looking at my own hands. I didn't understand why they wouldn't stop shaking. At supper, Grandmama apologized again for whipping my legs and told me that when I wrote my report on the book of Psalms that I had to write later that night, I could write, quote, the way we talk. She said that she wouldn't show it to you. Don't let no one make you feel like you're less than God's child. That's exactly what you are. You can talk to me about anything you feel, Key. Later that evening, I wrote, quote, I know you want me to write about the book of Psalms and Reverend Weathersby's preaching. If it's okay, I just want to tell you about some secrets that make my head hurt. I be eating too much and staying awake at night and fighting people in Jackson. Mama does not like how my eyes are always red. I wake her up in the morning and she be making me use Visine before school. I try, but I can't tell her what's wrong. Can I tell you? Can you help me with my words, Grandmama? The words Mama make me use when I write and talk to her don't work like they're supposed to work. Then I wrote the words. Be running the train. Be beating my back. Be hearing her heartbeat. Be slow dancing with me. Be rubbing her breast in my mouth. Be watching people. Be getting beaten. Be on top of me. Be on his knees. Be kissing me in the morning. Be kissing him at night. Be calling me nigga. Be hitting me hard. Be saying white folk hit the hardest. Be laughing so it won't hurt. Be eating when I'm full. Be telling them to say he stank. Be treating us like niggas. Be eating when I'm full. Be kissing me in the morning. Be eating when I'm full. Be running the train. At the end I wrote, Grandmama, can you help me with my words? Can you please help me? I gave Grandmama my notebook when I was done, like I'd done every Sunday night we spent together. Unlike other nights, she didn't say anything about what I'd written. When she walked by, I didn't even hear her breathing. Later that night, before bed, Grandmama got on her knees and turned off the light. She told me she loved me. She told me that tomorrow would be a better day. Before both of us went to sleep, I asked Grandmama if 218 pounds was too fat for 11 years old. What you weighing yourself for anyway, she asked me. 218 pounds is just right, Key. It's just heavy enough. Can I ask you one more question before we go to bed? Yes, baby. Grandmama said that she faced me for the first time since I gave her my notebook. What do you think about counting to 10 in case of emergencies? That's what Mama said I'm supposed to do. Ain't no emergency that God can't help you forget, Grandmama told me. Evil is real, Key, and all we can do is pray to avoid it. But what about the sad stuff that folk who love you do to you? What are you supposed to do with that? You forget it, Grandmama said, or you go stone cold crazy. Be still with all them good things you got. Try to think about them quick foots. Quick feet, Grandmama, I told her. Quick feet. Grandmama made me pray again that night. I kept thinking about rooms and sounds. I prayed for you to never close the door to your room if Isaiah Horde was in there. I prayed for you to never close the door to your room if I was in there alone with you. I prayed for Noelle and Dougie to never go back into Daryl's room. I prayed for Grandmama to have some money so she wouldn't have to stand in a big room and take the bloody guts out of chicken before standing in a smaller room and washing the shitty underwear of white folk who called her out her name. All those rooms were differently shaped, differently colored, differently scented, but they all moaned the same in my memory, in my imagination. When I got off my knees, I wanted Grandmama to tell me that everything would be okay. I wanted her to tell me that her body would be there with my body through all of its emergencies. But my grandmama was asleep. She was tired, and she was trying, as best she could, to forget the words and the memories that we both heard that day. So that's that chapter. Okay, let me just say something briefly about, so that chapter is called B. It's the third chapter in this book called Heavy. The book is about, thematically, what I told you about before. In terms of plot, it's about my talking to my grandmother about my experience with sexual violence, some things that I've seen in my house that happened to my mom, some things that I've seen that happened to my friends, and ultimately about my grandmama, the person who I believe could always make everything right for me, telling me as best she could that she couldn't do nothing about it because she hadn't dealt with her own stuff. And so by the end of the book, we're talking about her experiences with sexual violence and her experience with food and her experience with racial terror. So I never read that out loud before, so I appreciate y'all listening to it. It's kind of hard to read. Okay, so we have a lot of time left because I was going to read something else. Do we want to talk for a bit, or what y'all want to do? Read. Okay. I'll read something that's a little less heavy, and I'll read part of something that's a little less heavy. And it's just the next chapter in the book. It's called They Don't Even Know. I'm not going to read all of it, but I just feel like maybe we can change the... Y'all can look at me differently. Okay? When I was 13 years old, Lathon Carlisle and I sat in the middle of a white classroom in a white Catholic school filled with white people we didn't even know. These white people watched us toss black vocabulary words, a sharp black machete, a red, delicious apple, and something Lathon called that black abundance back and forth. We were new 8th graders at St. Richard's Catholic School in Jackson, Mississippi, because Holy Family, the tiny all-black Catholic school we attended most of our lives, closed abruptly due to lack of funding. Lathon, who looked like a slew-footed Casey from Jodeci, and I sat in the back of homeroom that first day of school doing what we always did, intentionally using and misusing last year's vocabulary words while Lathon cut up his red delicious apple with a greasy plastic butter knife. They know we here on discount, he told me, but they don't even know. Tuition at St. Richard's was usually over $300 a month, but the Catholic Diocese of Jackson let those of us who left Holy Family come to St. Richard's for $72 a month we normally paid. You're right, I told him. They don't even know. They don't even know that you an old fruit by the pound eating ass nigga. Pears and plums and figs and muscadines, everything. Give me some of that apple. Don't be meager or parsimonious with it either. Nigga, you act like I got apples galore up in here, Lathon said. I got one apple. Seth Vincent, a white boy who spent the first few minutes of the day silent farting and turning his eyelids inside out, asked both of us what galore meant. It's like galore, I told him, and looked at Lathon. You know, like apples galore. But how is it apples galore when all you guys have is one apple? Seth asked. And how do you guys know what parsimonious means? Lathon sucked his teeth and rolled his eyes. Seth, whatever your last name is, First of all, your name is Seth 6'2", because you 5'4", but you got the head of a nigga we know for 6'2". Don told me. You don't even know, bruh. The eyelid shit, we stopped doing that in what, 6th grade? Everything about y'all is erroneous. Just that black abundance. Y'all do not even know. Lathan's favorite vocab word in 7th grade was abundance, but I never heard him throw black and that in front of it. You guys are awesome, Seth told us as Lathan offered half of his apple in the use of his plastic butter knife. As much as Lathan and I loved each other, he would have never offered me half of his apple or his butter knife at Holy Family. I would have never expected him to either. While Lathan was cutting into his apple into smaller slices, he looked at me and said again, Seth 6'2" in them? They don't even know about this slicing style right here. Watch this. Right as Lathan dapped me up, Miss Reeves, our red-haired 5'11" white homeroom teacher, pointed at Lathan and me. We looked at each other, shook our head, and kept cutting our apple slices. Put the knife away, Lathan, she said. Put it down, now. Meager, we said to each other. Meager. The opposite of Lathan's favorite word was my favorite vocabulary word at the end of 6th grade. We use meager depending on its different pronunciation to describe people, places, things, and mostly styles that were at least 8 levels less than shit. Meager, I told her again, and pulled out my raggedy trapper keeper. Meager. Lathan and I love making lists of our #1 pleasures, and we love keeping those lists from my mama and his grandparents. I pulled out a piece of college-lined paper from the trapper keeper while Miss Reeves was talking. I wrote, quote, #1 tape of our #1 group, and handed it to Lathan. Lathan wrote, EPMD and Strictly Business. I wrote, #1 tape of our #1 MC. Lathan wrote, Criminal Minded and KRS-One, and handed it back to me. I wrote, #1 white person who don't even know, and handed it to Lathan. Lathan wrote, Miss Reeves, nigga, who you think? Well, her meager ass. Miss Reeves kept talking to us the way my mama told us white folk would talk to us if we weren't perfect. The way police talked to my mama whether she'd broken the law or not. I understood that Miss Reeves had every reason in the world to think that I was a hard-headed underachiever, and my red eyes and sweaty neck probably made her know that I drank half a mason jar of boxed wine before coming to school. But Lathan was as close to abundant as an 8th grader could be. And that abundance wasn't even the dopest thing about it. Lathan was the best math and science student at Holy Family next to Manager Crump. And he was going to be the best math and science student next to Manager Crump at St. Richard's. Cutting apples into finely shaped slices was something that only he could do. He studied that kind of shit the way we all study for algebra tests. Ever since I'd known him, Lathan was always into precision, always into odd shapes and angles. For 4 years, I watched Lathan and his other friend, Jabari, sit on his bed at his grandparents' house and build small generators, electric cars, and gaming systems, drum machines, and radio mixers. I watched him tear open a TV and make it into a bootleg version of Frogger. I'd never seen him come close to hurting someone who hadn't hurt him first, not with a knife, or his hands, or even his words. It's not a knife, I told Miss Reeves. It's a plastic butter knife. Lathan ain't trying to cut nobody. Who being so fucking preposterous? That was it. It's time for me to go to the office. As we walked, Lathan kept telling her, we ain't studying you. We ain't studying you. Lathan looked at me and sucked his teeth. This St. Richard shit? Nigga, this shit ain't gonna work. Miss Reeves came back. Oh, wait, hold on. I walked behind Lathan, remembering where we were 3 months earlier. Since Madra Crump and Barrica Whittington had the highest grades in English and math, they got to choreograph a dance to Club Nouveau's Lean On Me for our last day at Holy Family. Our whole class spent 3 recesses learning the moves before dressing in maroon suspenders and white t-shirts and walking across the street to the old folks' home. Them dusty old riggedy black folks got mad when we were remixing Bill Withers songs. They kept telling us, y'all wrong for that. Y'all wrong for that. They treated us like we were the real Club Nouveau, even though most of us couldn't dance or sing a lick. Next to Field Day, that Lean On Me day was the best day of our year at Holy Family. I sat in the principal's office thinking about what Mama told me the day before we started St. Richard's. Be twice as excellent and be twice as careful from this point on, she said. Everything you thought you knew changes tomorrow. Being twice as excellent will get you half of what they get. Being anything less will get your ass held, kid. I assumed we were already twice as excellent as the white kids at St. Richard's precisely because their library looked like a cathedral and ours was an old trailer up on cinder blocks. Plus, I didn't know how to be twice as excellent as folks who just really didn't seem excellent at all. I remember telling Mama that 2 times 0 equals 0. I thought Mama should have told me to be twice as excellent as her, as Grandmama, as Lathan, as Madra Crump. Lathan and I both got beaten when we got home that day because white people were scared of niggas eating apples with a plastic butter knife, which meant that white people were scared of niggas, which meant that white people knew much more than they ever would admit. With every lash Mama brought down on my body, I was reminded of what I knew and how I knew it. I knew Holy Family closed due to lack of funding because black people didn't have no money. I knew that there was never a poor school, white school in the history of Mississippi absorbed by a mostly black school because white folk didn't want to go to school with us. I knew that Mama didn't want white folk to judge her if I came to school with visible welts on my body because she beat me on my back and my butt and my thighs instead of my arms, my neck, my hands, and my face. I knew that I was getting beaten for the failures and lack of excellence of white teachers. I knew that I was getting beaten for the failures and lack of excellence of white students. I knew that Mama, Grandmama, my great-grandmama, my great-great-grandmama were beaten for the same reasons. The next day at school, the teachers at St. Richard's made sure Lathan and I never shared a classroom again. The only time we saw each other at school was during recess. Mama told me that it wasn't fair, but it was safer that way. I assumed that she was right. A few months later, our English teacher, Miss Ellington, made us watch Roots for Black History Month. I was the only Holy Family kid in my English class. I remember Kunta Kinte from Reading Rainbow hanging on the side of a barn where an Irish white man in a Captain Crunch hat directed this country-thick black man to whip Kunta's back until he agreed that his new name was Toby. When Kunta finally said his name was Toby, the Irish white man in the Captain Crunch hat said, "Aye, that's a good nigga." I wanted to pass a note to someone black in class saying they don't even know, but I was alone, so I wrote it to myself. They don't even know, period. They don't even know, comma. They don't even know, question mark. Near the end of class, Ms. Ellington talked about the speaker, object, and point of view in some of the scenes we just watched. And she gave some, quote, historical context to help us understand Roots. I didn't understand why historical context in our English class meant that we had to understand how even good white folk could treat all black folk like niggas, and how bad white folk on Roots were nothing like the good white folk sitting around me in that class. They don't even know, I wrote to myself again. They don't even know. No punctuation. Let's skip this part. The next day in English class, we watched a scene where Kizzy, Kunta Kinte's daughter, was sexually assaulted by this white man named Tom Moore. The morning after the assault, a black woman played by Helen from the Jeffersons came by to wash Kizzy's wounds. Helen told Kizzy, "You best know about Master Tom Moore. He one of them white mans that like nigger women. Reckon he be bothering you most every night. Used to bother me, but not no more." They don't even know, I wrote to myself. I don't even know. I wasn't sure what to do with what I just watched and what happened in my house the night before. I wasn't sure what to do with the sexual violence I'd seen and experienced. Not knowing and being the only Holy Family kid in my classroom made me more and more afraid. At recess that day, the white students moved with the same eager stiffness they always move with during break. And all of us Holy Family kids moved a little bit differently. Lathan and I found Madra Crump. Madra Crump didn't usually cuss much at all, but she said, "That Roots shit, it got my head hurt. I had my ears closed the whole time." Madra Crump walked away from us and went to talk to Baraka, who was sitting on the ground next to Hassanati. I'd gone to school with all three of them my entire life, and I'd never seen them sit in a circle looking at each other's feet. I wondered again how much of it had to do with what was happening in the classrooms of St. Richard's, and how much of it had to do with what was happening in the bedrooms in their own homes. Lathan said that we should go find Jabari and make sure he was okay. Out of all of us Holy Family kids, Jabari made the easiest transition to St. Richard's. He really wanted to sleep at white folks' houses. He really wanted to ride in white folk cars and eat white folks' food. He didn't dump us or talk shit about us because we didn't want to do anything like that. But he was working toward loving white people in ways that we just weren't. We walked in the building and thought maybe Jabari was talking to Miss Stockard, since that was something he liked to do during recess. When we walked in a room, Miss Stockard said she was glad we came to talk to her because she wanted to talk to us for weeks. Guys, I really want to be respectful, she said. How is Jabari doing? We both looked at each other without blinking. Listen, I need you guys to tell Jabari to take a shower or a bath before coming to school. Maybe a bath at night and a shower or wash up in the morning. Some students and a few teachers came to talk to me about, his odor, and it's really grossing everyone out. It's just really gross. We burst out laughing at first because there was nothing funnier that year than hearing your white teacher talk about how stanky one of your black friends was. Miss Stockard, are you trying to say that Jabari stank? I asked her. Lathan bust out laughing. You said wash up and we be saying wash off. I'm not saying anything about, she used her hands to make air quotes, stank. I'm saying that some people think Jabari's just gross. You guys can understand how that's not good for any of you, right? Lathan and I stood silently next to each other. We both seen people hurt, punched, stabbed. We both saw his cousin get shot. Nothing I'd ever seen felt quite like that moment when Miss Stockard called our brother gross, meager. I don't even know why Jabari stank was okay at Holy Family, but somehow gross at St. Richard's. I knew Jabari smelled at St. Richard's the same way Jabari smelled at Holy Family, the same way he smelled ever since his mama died. It wasn't his odor, and it wasn't that he didn't take showers or baths or wash-offs. Ever since his mama died, there were just a different scent as soon as you walked in Jabari's house, and if you stayed there longer than 30 minutes, you left smelling like that too. But all of us were stanky at some point, even Madra Crump. And when we were stanky, we laughed about it, or we took a shower, or we threw on some deodorant, or we threw on some cologne or some perfume on top of our stank, and we just kept it moving. I just didn't even know how white boys at St. Richard's like Seth 6'2" could have breath that forcefully stank through gum, peppermints, now laters, Laffy Taffies, and none of us ever thought to call him or his stank breath crew gross. I understood now, swaying there in front of Miss Stockard, that there were words, word patterns, vocal inflections we heard at St. Richard's that we never heard at Holy Family. No one at Holy Family ever said awesome or totally or amazing or foobar or like 50 times more than necessary. We said words like fly and all that and fresh and the shit and all world and living foul and sorry ass and getting full and 50 times more than necessary. There wasn't a gross or anything approximating a gross in our vocabulary. 7th grade was the first year in our lives where boys started calling girls who wouldn't give us any attention words like freak behind their backs. And when they slapped the taste out of our mouths, we apologized. But even in our brittle whispers, we never thought or talked about any girl as gross. Gross, like a lot of our experiences at St. Richard's, didn't translate. It wasn't a part of where we were from. Funky was not gross. Stanky was not gross. Living foul was not gross. Fucked up was not gross. Meager was not gross. Worse than any cuss word we can imagine, gross existed on the other side of what we considered black and loving. Lathan and I loved Jabari too much to tell him that Miss Stockard and some of the white kids whose smiles, words, and food he loved thought he was gross. Instead of saying any of what I really wanted to say to Miss Stockard, who had the power to kick us out of school, which meant she had the power to get me beaten by my mama, I said, "We understand, Miss Stockard. We will tell Jabari to take more wash-offs before he comes to school. Thank you for not sending us to the principal when we laughed in your face. Later that day, Lathan and I met Jabari in the backyard. Lathan hyped the soft-ass dunk Jabari did on his 9-foot hoop in his backyard. He called the dunk the Abundance, and I gave Jabari the name King Slender. Jabari flew through the air doing awkward versions of the Abundance until the sun went down. Every time he did it, Lathan and I laughed and laughed and laughed until we didn't. Eventually, Jabari laughed with us when Lathan said, "They don't even know about this abundance, for real. We can't even be mad, bruh. They don't even know about this right here." "We can be mad," Jabari said, "but we can be other stuff too." I was probably the slowest learner of all the kids in Holy Family who came. I was probably the slowest learner of all of the kids who came from Holy Family, but I was finally understanding why white men and white women, much more than white boys and white girls, were taught to discipline black children like black adults and talk down to black adults like they were black children. I was finally learning that for all that bouncy talk of ignorance and how they didn't know, white folk, especially older white folk, knew. They knew. They knew that niggas couldn't have plastic knives in class. They knew it was okay to show niggas getting beaten and raped without context or care in a class full of white students. They knew to never ever come enroll at a school where niggas were the majority. They knew. They didn't have the courage or the will to care about their investment in what they knew, but they knew. By the end of February of our 8th grade year, what white folk at St. Richard's and the world knew or didn't know didn't really matter to us anymore. We were learning how to love each other. We were learning how to bend and break and mend and laugh each other whole. We were learning how to organize, even though we didn't use that word. We were learning how to create and how to revise and how to imagine. We were learning the importance of imitation, interrogation, and innovation. Like our parents and our grandparents, we would feel poverty and death and detention and incarceration and suffering in ways white folk would never know. And we knew we would feel it acutely, precisely so white folk would never have to feel it at all. But we would love and feel and describe the fullness of black life too. That meant a lot. And mostly it meant that though we were pubescent messes, we were not the gross ones. We were not the gross ones. Though we were reckoning with violence at home, we were not the gross ones. Though we didn't always have lunch money or bill money or tuition, we were not the gross ones. On the way out of Jabari's house that day, Lathan and I grabbed a stanky t-shirt from Jabari's dirty clothes. We didn't plan it, we didn't talk about it. I was well into an XL at that point, and Jabari and Lathan's bird chest barely filled out a schmedium. But I learned from Mom and Grandmama how to make anything, regardless of shape and size, fit. Lathan and I came to school the rest of that February smelling like Jabari. When white folk looked at us like we were gross, we smiled, intentionally misused, mispronounced, or overused some vocabulary words. Then we dapped each other up, smelling like we were supposed to smell. Smelling like that second before death. Smelling like that minute after birth. I'm gonna have to do it from memory. Let me do that one more time. On the way out of Jabari's house, Lathan and I each grabbed a stanky t-shirt from Jabari's dirty clothes. We didn't plan it. We didn't talk about it. I was well into an XL at that point, and Jabari and Lathan's bird chest barely filled out a schmedium. But I learned from Mom and Grandmama how to make anything, regardless of shape or size, fit. Lathan and I came to school the rest of that February smelling like Jabari. When white folk looked at us like we were gross, we smiled, intentionally misused, mispronounced, or overused some vocabulary words. Then we dapped each other up, smelling like we were supposed to smell, smelling like that second before birth, smelling like that minute before death, after death. And because we didn't really know how to say, "I love you so much, man," we said, "This that black abundance." We so gross. They don't even know. Okay, that's it.